we're looking at taking well-being to new heights. Right with me here, we've got Joseph.
Hi, everyone.
And we've got Adam.
Hi, how are you?
Right, so Adam is actually the head of safety for health and well-being at Asia-Pacific Airbus, right?
Correct.
So before we start, I want to find out about how you ended up being in safety and something that you never thought about as we spoke earlier.
Yeah. So I think, like I've always said, if you would have told me 20 years ago when I was in the police that I'd be head of safety and wellbeing for a major aviation manufacturer, I probably would have laughed at you. But being injured in a workplace accident and taking a long time to recover, was sort of like, well, this really isn't the done thing.
Yeah.
And then from the wellbeing perspective, I had a really unfortunate incident where I had a team member, take her own life. And as a leader, I missed every red flag, and I've really always maintained that if I knew then what I know now, I could have intervened, and I really do harbour a little bit of personal guilt over that. So I'm really on a mission to make sure that people are both physically and psychologically safe in the workplace. And Airbus does a great job it does a great job supporting that initiative.
Thank you for that authenticity and for sharing. Really appreciate that. It obviously means something to you. It's personal for you. But just as you went through this evolution in your perception and view of this topic, how do you see organizations view mindsets changing and evolving with respect to employee mental health and well-being?
Yeah, so I think it's quite daunting, when organizations look at this for the first time. And in some cases, we see some organisations that pay lip service to it, because it's a tick in the box, But I see other organisations, like Airbus, really making a concerted effort, by really employing a lot of different strategies that are agile, that take into account a very diverse workforce. Like in Singapore, we have I don't know how many nationalities, and cultures and religions, and they do a great job in, structuring the well-being and safety programs to consider those. It's around having things like our employee assistance program, which is run through our third-party provider. We have mental health first aiders. We just had people on the course today. We have some peer support networks, where we have on-site psychologists and counsellors in some location. And we have in Australia we have therapy dog program. There's a whole range of solutions out there apart from just the one size fits all EAP, but I think what I'm starting to see is really making sure that those conversations they're a start. They're non-threatening, and in such a way that they address both the psychological and the physical side. And I think from that first part, it's really good to see that Singapore, with the additions to the Workplace Safety and Health Act, really encourage psychological well-being, as a critical risk, within the business, and I think that's a great step forward.
Yeah, I just want to say that one life lost is one life too many in a workplace setting, and I hear what you're saying a lot about the stigmatization, a lot about the companies bringing out programs, even the therapy dogs in Australia. All this must be huge investment. How do we take it from workplaces? Why should I commit such an investment if I'm an owner of a business today?
I suppose the question is, do you want to be sustainable? Do you want to be competitive? Do you want to actually make a difference? We understand we all have the bottom line. Right, we get it 100%. But when you look at you look beyond those financial metrics. When you invest in mental health programs, you look at your employee engagement, you look at your retention rates, look at your absenteeism, you look where people feel valued, and that straight away is a return of investment. So the people are happy to work, they go the extra mile, within reason, and they're committed to the company. Whereas if people don't feel like they're inclusive, they're not being looked after, the simple fact is they will just go elsewhere. Like a lot of companies do it really great, and a lot of companies do it really, really bad. So it's about finding that balance, because at the end of the day we're operating a business, right? We got to achieve our deliverables for deliveries. We got to meet the expectations of the customer.
Of course,
we have to make sure that our shareholders get their ROI. But we also have to put good ROI into our people. Because it's the people that make the business work.
we talked about ESG a little bit. Let's stay on that topic. There's an increasing recognition of the link of ESG and employee well-being. How do you see this fitting into Airbus's broader ESG strategy?
Yeah, obviously. So when you look at obviously under the E, the S, and the G, so obviously health and well-being fit very clearly in the governance side. So we have those structured governance programs. But also there's very much the social layer.
Yes.
As well.
Yes.
So which sort of reminds me of a program I was involved in called the Resilience Shield, which talks around the different layers around mental health and well-being and resilience. And that social layer, and making sure there's a good link between the governance. Okay, we have to do it. But we do it because it's socially acceptable and really socially expected that we're providing this support to our workers. Because like I said, at the end of the day, your people are your best asset.
Yeah, I think there's a requirement. I think mandatory 2027 for all listed companies to for ESG reporting. To report. So this is one area that they can really look to level up. The S and the G part especially.
Yeah, so we're doing some. So obviously European corporate sustainability. CSR, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which Airbus launched last year as a trial. We capture a whole bunch of data around wellness and illnesses and psychological safety and well-being included in that. So we're looking at all those absenteeism and retention rates. And now how that's benefiting. So we can start to identify the issues to put those proactive programs in place. So I think that the reporting frameworks are really good because it gives a little bit more incentive to the organisations to make sure they invest appropriately.
Yeah, when we meet organizations, sometimes organizations tells us that they do certain programs, one-off programs, and they expect heaps of returns, right? So I don't believe in one-off initiatives. I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, your commitment is...
I totally agree. So I've been through programs, where you go and do like a one-day course and you're blessed and away you go. The reality is that doesn't work. So we have a program where we, through our data, we identified a particular work group. We're at high risk of burnout. And we had all the studies from McKinsey that talked about Asia-Pacific being the highest rate of burnout. Over the global average, APAC is that. We identified this really cool group of sales and marketing guys who are isolated from their leadership. They've got to travel, they're fatigued, they've got to make decisions which affect a substantial part of the business. And sort of, well, who are they like? What industry could we compare them to? And I said, well, really, from my perspective, when you look at all those variables, you're talking about a special forces operator, someone from the SEAL team or Delta Force, and okay, well, how can we fix that? Well, okay, let's have a look. So we went out and we spoke to a couple of different organisations, and we have, so a guy called Kevin Humphreys who provides leadership training, to the team in Australia. We're hoping to bring him to Singapore. And we have another guy, Dr. Dan Pronk from the Resilience Shield, who's an ex-SAS combat doctor who came to Singapore and ran training for the sales team. Now, he ran a 2-day program. But it was 6 months of ongoing follow-up mentoring with a bunch of trained mentors, to make sure this team have the frameworks to build their resilience, so they're being more operationally productive, but also giving them the skills to set those boundaries, and to recognise when they're potentially suffering burnout or they're on the verge of burnout or they're on the verge of fatigue and because we have all these frameworks in place for our pilots and aircrew, like flight duty times for pilots, layover times, but we don't have that for our corporate teams. And that's consistently not just within Airbus, but it's, I think, a lot of organisations, especially in the corporate space. And if someone was to ask me, who's your most high-risk environment, it's going to be the corporate team. Because they're always working long hours.
No respite, right?
They're always on their phones, and they think that they need to be contactable 24/7, so. And that's something we need to work on. That's not going to change overnight. That's a culture.
We touched on a few things there. The first thing that you touched on was that you are data informed, right? That informs what you run as a program, and you've identified a specific target group to receive that program. Especially now with the Champions Network, of course, we deal with all sorts of companies, right? So not just the multinationals, but also your SMEs and really small companies, right? One easy way to start for them is to start with some kind of a mental health talk on awareness, right? Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing because they want to do something and that's where they start. But very rarely we find that's actually being informed by anything. It's more like, we've done some form of employee engagement or well-being climate study or whatever, and these are the issues that people say that they're facing at work, and this is how we're going to address them. So it doesn't tend to get start from there. So then they end up having a talk, and while they may get some participation, what actually happens is another thing that you touched on is that continuity post that engagement or that intervention, right? So I think it's very, very important to be informed by data, and it's also to continue that learning and engagement and awareness building. Everyone has a role to play, and I do ask this question, right? So you're from coming from a safety perspective, whose responsibility is well-being in an organization?
Well, it's really top management, and it's really everyone.
Okay.
So if I'm sitting with my work colleague and I can see that they're not themselves, and I really have an obligation to go, hey, you okay? Like we had the Are you okay day is not just one day of the year.
Yeah.
It's every day. Like, are you okay? Let's go and have a coffee. Well, for me it's bubble tea. I have that addiction from coming to Singapore. And it's really around, so we have different levels. So we have our president and our managing directors driving this, and every opportunity they get. We provide training to our leaders and our managers, so they're driving it. We're providing, web lives to our workers. So it's that ongoing cyclic revolution, continuum of messaging and support. And like when I run web lives, I run the web lives, and sometimes I get 400 people on the call. And then I get smashing questions afterwards. But it has to be a really ongoing, continual program.
And I hear it from you that leaders always set a certain tonality at workplace culture, because if they walk the walk, they need to talk the talk, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So 100%. Yeah, so I've been in organisations where they say safety departments over there. Where I've actually I've had some of the MDs go, no, I want you to support me with providing me with some of the key stats. Then I'm going to look at those stats.
And then what?
Then I'm going to deliver it. I'm going to put my spin on it so people know it's coming from me. I just don't want to read a script that you've given me. So that's great. So I find the leaders in Airbus really take ownership.
The accountability.
Really take ownership of it, which is great.
Super question. First question, what kind of competencies do you think leaders need to have to support their teams effectively? Part one. Part two is, what are some practical ways that leaders can foster a psychological safety in the workplace?
Let me answer the second question first. I'll give you an example. So it's really about leaders being leaders. And really making sure they're looking after their people, because leaders have a really big impact on a person during the day. Like they spend 8 to 10 hours potentially a day with them.
Right.
They have to be able to understand, that the way they engage is important. So if I can just give an example, so when I ran my team back in Australia, I told them they had to go and take leave. Because people would bank leave, I like take leave. Now when you go on leave, you bring me your laptop and your mobile phone, stick it in the drawer. And I don't want to see you for 2 weeks.
Okay.
I'll check in on you if you want me to if you want me to, but otherwise I don't want you logging on. I don't want you checking your emails. I want you to relax and
I'm keeping my phone away from you.
I hide my phone.
But I did find someone, and you know who you are, if you're watching, that would log on, through the other way we have to log on. And what's she doing online? The little green light pops up. So a little green light pops up. I just go, if you don't get off, I'm going to have you disconnected from the network. Sorry, I'll come back to the first part of the question. So I think, we look at things like emotional intelligence,
right?
Like being self-aware, providing empathy, and having those social skills. Because I remember there was Kev Humphreys, who's our mental health ambassador, who had his own struggles with mental health. He talked about his leader told him that you won't show him sympathy, but show him empathy. So I think empathy is a big thing. I think, communication skills, active listening is always really important. And having things like good ethical and professional standards about balancing, when we have to do certain things around confidentiality, those really evidence-based practices. But I also think things around like self-care and lifestyle management, which sort of like leads into that second part I mentioned about taking people's laptops off them.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a whole range of key competencies, I think, and we're starting to embed those now into some of our leadership training.
How do you balance the need for empathy whilst balancing high performance expectations?
Yeah, so there's always going to be surges. You know, there's always going to be, you know, requirements for additional work, you know, based on a customer requirement. You know, like we work in the helicopter division, and like we work in a very fluid, dynamic environment. You know, we provide machine helicopters to police, fire, EMS.
Yeah.
You know, if one of those machines goes down, and it's an EMS helicopter, they're providing aerial transport for patients. Like that aircraft can't be on the ground. Like we got to, you know, get it back on, get it going. You know, so and obviously we understand we had those surges, but it's really about the managers and leaders understanding that long-term sustained surges, they're just not good.
Yeah.
You know,
So a lot of people asked us, right? It's work-life balance.
Yep.
But I think in our opinion here is having a balanced life at work, right? That makes it magical.
Yeah, so I think that's how you phrase it. You know, like people say work-life balance. I like to say you balance your life with work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and people think back and they just go, work-life balance life with work, work-life balance. So you know, that would work. You know, so that
I get it.
but it's all about just starting the conversation.
Yep.
You know, and whatever you can use to start that conversation.
Yeah. Whoever is watching, you gotta take a little while to digest that conversation of work-life balance at work, or balanced life at work, or whatever that is, right?
That's it.
Yeah, but I want to bring it back to an important piece, right? On being very personal side of things. If I'm somebody with a well-being issue, and if I come out and I get stigmatized by it, I don't think I will ever be open. So the challenges that Airbus face in this aspect or this context, I mean, what happens with balancing privacy and having a need to, you know, be open about it?
Yeah, so I think, you know, and that's why we're really big on the leadership training. You know, like we have, like I mentioned, Keith Humphreys, who's our lead, one of our wellbeing ambassadors. You know, we talk about the leadership training, you know, about providing them with the tools and awareness to support mental health and sort of try and get rid of that stigma. You know, we partner with a lot of other experts, you know, and we really ensure that the workers know, or anyone who utilises our services through the EAP, is they are totally confidential.
Yeah.
You know, like, and during the podcast, when we do the web lives, and I had the rollout, I showed them, this is the report we get.
Yeah.
You know, like I can see the number of people that call.
Yeah.
I don't know what department you're in.
Yeah.
I don't know what team you're in. I don't know what floor you're on. You know, all I know is someone from Singapore has called in relation to this.
Yeah.
And there's like 5 criteria, like work-related stress, you know, home-related stress, you know, so financial stress, you know, other.
Yeah.
You know, and like I've got so many people in Singapore. Like I don't, like, no way we could identify it. You know, we said, look, this information's here. This is all we get. You know, because our privacy laws we have in the various countries prohibit this is sensitive medical data. You know, like we can't. And it makes it counterproductive. If people don't feel safe to report, we're not going to get any data. And it's about having the data. And we made it as simple as we can. Like we give everyone a little thing with a QR code. You can scan it.
Yeah.
They can write their report.
Yeah.
Or they can scan another QR code, which is on a poster we have in the workplace, and they goes directly to the counsellors. You know, so totally it's connected from Airbus.
What we realized also talking to all these organizations, if they do have an EAP program offering to the employees, typically the utilization is low. That's not very atypical. That's quite a usual, normal response. But that's not to say that EAPs aren't effective. You still need to have them. How can we make them more effective? Earlier, I think off mic, we talked about peer supporters and the role peer supporters could play in being an effective bridge. And possibly even making EAP more effective.
Right.
We know some of the barriers to adopt to using EAP. While we communicate that it's safe and it's confidential, the company doesn't know. Still, there's that stigma, right? And so peer supporters can play the role to lower that stigma. But then, how then do you preserve the confidentiality aspect there when you're having a conversation from peer to peer?
I think it's really important that the people who are mental health first responders, you know, peer support officers, know that they're not clinicians. You know, they need to know their role. They need to stay in their lane.
Yeah.
And they need to clearly articulate to the person, look, hey, my job is to do this. You know, like my job is to help you make those connections to professionals. You know, because one thing that we don't think of all the time is people who are peer support officers, you know, they do it because they want to do it, because they have an interest in it, they want to help people.
Yeah.
But what support do we give them? Because if they have like 10 conversations in a day,
Yeah.
you know, like they're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You know? And the example I use is when we have the therapy dogs come in, like they're taking a lot of the stress and pressure from people. And I see at the end of the day, you know, like they're cooked. You know, like some of them have to get carried to the car, you know, because they're engaging with so many people.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the same as the first responders, you know, and the peer support officers. And plus the other thing is that there's all that issue around, you know, confidentiality. You know, like they're not protected by the legal protections from doctors and psychologists.
That's
you know?
right.
So it's really about making sure that training, that really sets that boundary for them so they know what their lane is.
Yeah.
And we start to see, you know, a lot of people staying in that lane, which is great.
Yep.
You know, and I'm not aware of any circumstances, obviously, within my organisation where people have crossed that line, but it's always finding that right person who wants to
That's
be
right.
But it's like I said, it's really about making sure that they're supported, as well as provided with the right training.
And how the company has really clarified all of this in the governance and policy documents. It's like this to really define the roles and responsibilities and the procedures and the processes for escalation, de-escalation, for crisis, and all that kind of stuff. And it's communicated. But you've touched on a very, very important point. And so we talk about all of this in the WFR, the World Wing First Responder Program. We cover all of this stuff. That's what the training is for. But one of the questions that we do get back from peer supporters is that, Joe, you've trained us to be well-being first responders. Who supports us?
Yeah.
Right? Because they are just normal people like you and I, right? How best can we support them? They're not, as you already say, they're not clinicians, they're not professional psychologists or psychiatrists or counselors even, of course. They're people like you and I who also go through normal stresses in life. So how do we support them? What do we need to do them to help them gain even more confidence to reach out to others?
Yeah, so I think it's about providing the additional layer.
Yeah.
You know, so we're always about layers, right? So it's about providing them an additional layer of support through the existing networks.
Yeah.
You know, so when we have the on-site psychologists, you know, like they have a session with the peer support officers, you know, and like the peer support officers, they should be getting additional resources and additional training, you know, to provide them with that support. Yeah. You know, but then it's them asking for it. You know?
That's right.
And when we have like the mental health first aiders get together, you know, like you have a session where you have the guest speaker, just as an example, you know, and then checking with everyone's okay. Yeah. You know, so there's really, like I said, it's asking that question. Yeah. You know, like I regularly ask, you know, the first responders, like, how many sessions have you had this month? You know, like, how more can I support you? You know, how more can we make sure that you're okay? Yeah. You know, so because there's always that, well, they're the peer support officer or they're the first responder, and no matter what we do for these guys.
Yeah.
You know,
So it has to be very
right.
intentional.
Yeah.
So check-ins and community of practice.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a community of practice set up with an Airbus, which is quite global.
Yeah.
So we have our wellbeing ambassadors and our leaders throughout the business, you know, and they have that community of practice where they have that safe space to go and have conversations about how they would deal with this, you know, and I'm not really dealing with this part too well, like how we can support them, because you know, like I said, it's about making sure they're just as good, because if the mental health first aiders and the peer support officers have problems, it's going to be issues. Going to have a flow on.
Yeah. So I want to bring it back to today's topic, right? Well-being to new heights. I mean, give it say 24 months. What can I expect from you at Airbus?
Well, I can
in 24 months.
If I give you the official answer, the official answer is that priority to ensure a psychologically safe and mentally resilient work.
Right. That's
I want
awesome.
a real,
That's
authentic
great.
answer.
What I really want is I really want people, you know, so they feel empowered to make the call. They feel psychologically safe. They know that they can reach out to people. They know that their manager is going to be empathetic. Right. They know that there's going to be no stigma attached to it if they take time off or they need a break for mental health, you know. And I'm happy to say to people, I'm taking mental health day today. You know, like I'll just send a note. So mental health day, you know, buzz me if you need me, if it's an emergency. No, but mental health day today. You know, and that should be something of the norm, you know. So, but it's really around, like I said, trying to expand programs. You know, like I think if we don't just focus on our EAP, like EAP is one, you know, like peer support, another, mental health first aid is another, therapy dogs is another. Yeah. You know, engaging with our external providers, you know, our guys like Dr. Dan Pronk, Kev Humphreys, you know, who are our external people we have that whole, you know,
community
arsenal,
and a network.
So we have every tool possible to make sure that, you know, people go home both physically and psychologically safe at the end of the day. So if I know that everyone's gone home at the end of the day and I've got no reports, no issues, no identified risks, I think we've done a good job.
Right.
Nice.
Any last questions?
Oh, well, we could keep going. I had one question. What challenges are you facing, or have you faced, in localizing or culturally adapting global initiatives?
Yeah, so the one-size solution fits all doesn't work. You know, like I said, you know, in Asia-Pacific we have a very diverse demographic of nationalities, cultures, religions. We have to take that into account. You know, so we adapt as best we can. You know, like it's really engaging with those people to say, okay, well, this is what's being proposed. How does this work for you?
Yep.
You know, like, and I'll give you an example. You know, so we're looking to expand the therapy dog program into Singapore. You know, so there obviously is some cultures and some religions where that's just not on.
Right.
You know, so we have to go and engage with, you know, like the Islamic Council to get some support and, you know, some guidance. You know, we have to also make, well, that's what we want to do for this group, but that group doesn't want to be involved in that. Well, that's fine. Well, what can we do to support you? You know, so
in parallel.
like, it's more about, it's not just about morning teas and cupcakes and, you know, yoga. You know, it's about, you know, making sure that the program that we have is applicable for that demographic. You know, and I'm really happy to say that with the investment and support that I've got in the region from the president, you know, all the way through the MDs and the Airbus country representatives and the leaders, and like I think we're definitely on the path to get there. Like we're not there yet. The way that we do it, is not the way. It's a way. And we just, I think it's baby steps though. You know, it's you got to make people feel comfortable, and once we can get people to feel comfortable, you know, we can get the managers engaged where it's just part of business as usual. I think we're going to be in a much better spot.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we have Adam Bernhardt, Head of Safety, Health and Wellbeing at Airbus Asia-Pacific. Daniel Lim here from the Wellbeing Champions Network, signing off.
Nice to join you. Thanks for listening in, and talk to you soon.
Thanks for the invite.